Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, author Matthew Hines. Now, today we're going to have a very interesting guest, and before I bring him out, I just want to remind you, if you haven't yet, please subscribe. YouTube doesn't feature my videos anymore, and of course, I get the same kind of censorship that any conservative, decent channel is going to get. So please share these videos, comment, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. All right, now, before we bring out our guest, I want to talk about a certain theme that we may be discussing tonight. Now, in history, we've talked about different people that were maybe great, maybe weren't. Maybe circumstances or fortune favored them more than others. Whatever the case may be, we all must share the same influences of life, and those are fate and destiny, the circumstances we were born in, as well as what lay in store for us as far as fate. So with these themes in mind, I want to talk to you a little bit about the guest I'm going to bring out. Now, many of our guests that we've had on this show in the past 18 months, we've had authors, we've had movie stars, we've had researchers, we've had people who have had amazing experiences, and we've had combinations of all three. We've had veterans on Books in Hindsight, we had commanders, we've had all kinds of very interesting people. But tonight we're going to be talking about somebody who I feel combines all of these aspects in one person. A guy who's had a really, really interesting life. He's lived in so many different places. He's done so many different things and has so many different interests. It's hard to believe that this is all in one person. So maybe we'll have to test him for multiple personalities or something before he gets off. But with that being said, I'd like you to meet our guest for tonight. For the next hour, we're going to be talking to none other than author, teacher, veteran, entrepreneur, and now governor state candidate, Mr. Matthew Hines. Hello, Matthew. Welcome to the show. Well, thanks, Matt. It's sure super to be here. All right, Matthew. Well, let's just go ahead and get started with some of the questions we have. Now, we started off the show by talking about this idea about fate and destiny combining. Would you care to tell us one incident or circumstance or something that happened in your life where you felt that fate and destiny combined and made you the person that maybe you are, or at least the person that you weren't before? Well, Matt, to be quite honest with you, I have no idea what it is you're talking about. But if you're talking about if there's something that's happened in my life that has affected the rest of my life, well, I'll have to answer that there are a number of things, and things, of course, happen every day that affect you and what your life turns out to be. But you know, in your little theory there, I have to also throw in that I think that a personality, and I think that will, and we see with the story of Oedipus of how the way he was, just his own brash personality to jump into action without thinking, was his own undoing. So I think that along with destiny and fate, I think we also have to look at those factors as well. And okay, so here's one. September 11th of 2001, watched the World Trade Center. Things going on, and I really didn't have a good feeling about it. And so I thought that it wasn't fair that they would stigmatize and blame these Muslims that had probably not very much to do with it. I thought that was really unfair. And so to do something about that, I took a job teaching over in the Middle East. So which has more effect on you? Fate or destiny? Or your personality? So did fate, destiny, and my own personality conspire or combine To change my life, I would have to say yes. I guess that fate would have been the what happened on September 11th. Um, my personality being suspicious of what the government does and how things are presented to us and how that turned out. Well, that was kind of my personality combining, and destiny, I guess, was my ability to find a really nice job teaching in a country called the Sultanate of Oman. So I hope I answered your question, but yeah, I do believe that the two combine, but I think that personal will, for good or evil, does overrides fate and destiny, or trumps fate and destiny in almost every case. So Matt, tell us, what did you want to be when you grew up? What did I want to be? Or what do I want to be? Ha 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 ha. All right, well, when I was a younger kid, I guess I started off, I wanted to be a Native American. I wanted to be one of the Native Americans, like back in the plains in about the 1800s, after the time that they got horses. Because I think before the time they got horses, I think that wouldn't have been very fun. But I read a book when I was younger. My grandmother bought me my first book. It was called Among the Shoshone. And that was about a kid who was captured by the Shoshone, and he just loved it. And so I really spent a couple of years just really hating the fact that I lived in this world when there was that other world 100 years or so ago that I could have lived in with the Shoshone. After that, I think that I went to football. By the fourth grade, I learned about Johnny Unitas and Joe Namath, and so I wanted to be one of those guys. I fancied myself one of the next O.J. Simpsons. So that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. As I got to be a senior or older in high school, I started to be interested more in the military. I was always interested, of course, in history, but I read every book in our library about every president, about every war, about every battle, about anything military that I could find. So I didn't necessarily want to be anything from that, but I figured I would end up being a general or something, or then being a president or something like that. Crazy, isn't it? But as I got into, let's say, the military, I really realized that I did not want to be in the military. I mean, I really found it very distasteful for a number of reasons. And I don't want to go into too many reasons, because it's a fine, honorable profession and all that. And you know, we should support people who serve. But I just felt that that was limiting for me. And one story I could tell you is that one time I was in Special Forces training, and we were at Fort Bragg, and we were doing these weapons. We were getting tested on these weapons. And I was just horrible at it because I was not mechanically inclined. I'd never worked on anything. And, you know, you had to assemble and disassemble these weapons. And so, anyway, I didn't like it at all. And so they sent us a survey, and they asked us what we wanted to do after the Army, if we were going to stay in the Army, what we wanted to do. And my answer was, and I quote, "I want to be a teacher because I want to teach people how to live, not how to die." And that didn't go over very well with the folks at the Special Forces training school. So anyway, I had a nice talking to from a captain and a colonel. But luckily, a friend of mine was the son of famous Colonel Greitz, Bo Greitz, and so he kind of stuck up for me, and I didn't get in too much trouble. But in the end, I thought that the military was not for me. I thought that a person should live their life doing something honorable. And for me, being a poor kid, I thought, well, I'll just be a teacher. That's a very interesting choice. A lot of people would not choose teaching for a lot of different reasons. So, why would you choose being a teacher? Well, just to add to my answer from before, I also felt that, and it's really funny for me to say because when I was growing up, I was the worst kid. I didn't take anything seriously, I didn't take school seriously. And then as I got older and I looked around, I thought, my gosh, these people are all way worse than I was. And so what happens, and again, we have to go back to the Greeks on this, but as Socrates once said, if everybody goes around stealing or lying to each other, then what good is the truth? What good is anything? You don't have any kind of society. And now we live in a society where truth is, I mean, it's almost like not politically correct to tell the truth. And if you tell the truth about anything anymore, then you get attacked. So I wanted to stick up for knowledge. I mean, this sounds crazy for me to be saying this, but excuse me, I wanted to stick up for knowledge. I wanted to stick up for all that was good and right and decent in the world. So you did 4 years in the 82nd Airborne Division, and you got out and you started college. Can you tell us a little bit about what life was like transitioning from such being in the 82nd Airborne is obviously a very stressful endeavor, and you did it for a long time as well as going through Special Forces School. So what was that like when you finally got out of the military and found yourself in college and in the civilian world of the United States? Well, to be quite honest with you, I can answer that with one word: Disneyland. Living in the United States and being in another country or being in the military, you are separated from, you just can only describe it as Disneyland. People in this country are so disconnected from what's going on. And when I got out of the military, I really understood that disconnectedness. Nobody had any idea, and I hadn't been through combat. I'd been overseas in a few different places, but I hadn't been in combat, and people could not even understand, and not only did not understand, did not care what I had been through. And it was really a shock to me because I think one of the things that they do to you in the military is they tell you how glad and that people are that you're doing what you're doing. But I really didn't find that. And I think a lot of people find that as well. And I think a lot of people have a hard time adjusting because they're told that for their service that things are going to be better. I mean, I guess it's like adopting a religion. And when things are not better, and oftentimes they're actually worse, then people get upset. People decide that they're depressed and they have a hard time coping. Now, there are a number of things for me, as you mentioned, that, every minute of my life was scheduled for 4 years, every minute, except for a 30-day leave period. But beyond that, from the time I woke up in the morning at 6 o'clock, I had to be downstairs saluting a flag and listening to a trumpet. And then I was owned all day and on and on. And other people had different experiences in the service. Some people it was very lax, whatever. But where I was, it was very racially charged. There were people that there were a lot of people that I served with that were fantastic people, but the people in charge of us were there because they just couldn't find a better job. And so we were all there to get college money. And so it was very difficult to be in the service, and then once you adjusted to it and you've made some kind of peace with the fact that you might die any day, and you live like an animal, and then suddenly, bam, you're in classes with these pretty girls, and you're not dirty, and you don't smell bad, and you're not waiting for the next MRE or C ration, and you're hoping you can get to, and not hoping that, oh, you can get to sleep before 2 o'clock that night, and it doesn't rain on you while you're sleeping. So changing from that environment to college, or even civilian life, was very, very tough. But the most important or stressful thing was money, was the idea about money, because to go from this is 1980s also, so it's probably much worse now, but in the military, they pretty much, your clothes are paid for, whatever, you're spending all their time in your military stuff, so you don't really need anything civilian. And then when you get out, you all suddenly have to pay for everything. And and when you're in the military, you don't realize how much stuff costs. And then when you get out and you've spent 4 years trying to get what they call a VEAP program, VEAP, where they contribute and match money that you put in, you realize that money is not enough. And so that's really very, very stressful. So all of that stuff really kind of, it made college very stressful. Now, on the flip side of all that, I will add that being in Special Forces school for like a year, and then spending all my time in the 82nd Airborne, when I went to college and they said, you just have to read these books and then write papers on them, I said, well, heck, I can do that. I can do that in any condition. I can do that asleep, compared to what I've been through. So college was actually fairly easy for me, but it also taught me that, and I'll tell you one more story before I go, is that my CO, who was the first Ranger who jumped into Grenada when we attacked Grenada down during the Reagan years, well, his company was the ones that were getting ready to jump in, and they said, we're not going to jump in, we're just going to land, and we're going to take the airfield from there. And this CO of mine said, no, we're not, let's go. And he took his 11 guys in his stick, and they jumped, and they went after the Cubans. So this guy told me, he said, Hines, he said, no matter what happens, he said, I had a friend in college that I wrestled with. He lived in a closet to get through college. He said, don't let me find out you didn't finish. So that was pretty nice. So that's my story, and that was what civilian life was. I always remember what Gale Sayers, his name was Gale Sayers, not the football player, but he said, don't let me catch you. And so I made sure I graduated. So Matthew, you got a degree at Washington State University, and you graduated, you wanted to be a teacher. So what happens next? Well, you could talk about that in various different aspects, but I wanted to be a teacher, and when I finished at Washington State University, they informed us that in Washington State you had to get a master's degree. So suddenly I needed to go back to get a master's degree, and then I would start teaching. So pretty much I worked over in Pullman. I managed Rusty's Bar and Grill for 6 months, and then after that I went to Alaska. Now Alaska really seems like an unusual choice for somebody who has been in the Army, who has graduated from a college in a little town in eastern Washington. How did you pick Alaska? Well, Matt, I'm not sure if I picked Alaska or if Alaska picked me. But the fact was, one of my roommates was from Anchorage, and she said, when, all through college, she said, you really should live in Alaska. She said, you fit in perfect in Alaska. And so after I graduated, I knew I needed to get that master's degree. So I decided, heck, I'm going to go check out Alaska, visit my roommate, and see what the heck is going on up there. After all, they made that song about it, so it couldn't be that bad. Well, Matthew, speaking of Alaska, you actually went to Alaska at the same time as another famous individual, not an author, but somebody who's had books written about them, and that was Chris McCandless, who was featured in the book, what was the book, Call of the Wild, or something like that, Into the Wild, I guess. You went to Alaska at the same time. So you shared completely different experiences. Why do you think your experiences were different than Christopher McCandless? Well, I think first of all, I was going to Alaska to be a teacher, to maybe go to college and to visit my roommate. I wasn't going to Alaska to live off moose meat and wild dingleberries. So Matthew, while you were in Alaska, is this the first time that you started to write? And what motivated you at that time to begin writing? I mean, you're in your 30s now, and a lot of people would have started a long time before that. So why the wait, and what motivated you to start while you were in Alaska? Well, I guess that again, we're back to that fate, destiny, and I think the word is temperament that we're really kind of looking for here. I was in my master's degree program. I had finished my part of a student teaching deal, and I was starting my real student teaching experience. And I had been substituting a lot, and I knew a lot about teaching. I'd been in the Army. I mean, I know teaching. After all, I'd had 12 years of training before I graduated high school. So I knew a lot about teaching, and I just had a really bad experience in my first student teaching experience with a advisor who just really wanted to push and push and push, and it was very difficult for me because I really thought he was just setting me up to fail me, and after all I'd been through. So I said I wanted to stop, and I stopped that experience, and I had to wait until the next semester started to do another student teaching experience, which I finished fine. But it was at that time I said, you know what, I've wanted to teach so I could write. And I don't know if I mentioned that before, but from the first book I ever read, I've read books all my life, and I thought I'm going to give back by writing great books like this. And so at that point in time, I said, I'm going to, again, I wanted to teach so I'd have a day job so I could write. And then I said, you know what, maybe I'm not going to have that day job. Maybe I'll just go ahead and write that book right now, get my bestseller out of the way, and then we'll see about teaching and all that. So I wrote my first real book, and it was called Conan the Librarian, which later somebody stole the title, but it was like a Monty Python-esque spoof of the fall of the Roman Empire. And well, that was my first writing experience. It took me months, and I did it all on a word processor, so it had to be all printed out, etc., so you could read it. And anyway, yeah, that was my first book. And what was the result of that book? Not for us. Not for us at this time. Doesn't seem like a good fit. Pretty much rejection after rejection after rejection. I guess at the time there wasn't a big demand for Monty Python-esque type novels about the fall of the Roman Empire. All right, Matthew, so let's leave Alaska and let's talk about the books you've published. And for that, okay, Matthew, so let's leave Alaska behind now and let's talk about the books that you actually have published. Now, the first thing that we have to get into is books about the Middle East. So, Matthew, what were you doing in the Middle East? Specifically, how did you go from Alaska to the country of Oman and then later Saudi Arabia? Oh, now that's kind of a tough one, and I don't want to spend the next few hours describing a bunch of horrible events in my life, but I will sum up by saying that after I finished graduate school, I spent a few years in Alaska, Wasilla, Palmer area, and I couldn't get a job as a history teacher. And one thing that they told us when I was in my graduate studies program was that if you're a white male trying to teach history, you better coach or you better find something else to do. And so I found myself basically in Alaska I subbed every day. I coached swimming, I taught Saturday school, I did everything for 2 high schools. And in the end, they wouldn't give me a job teaching. Number one, I had a master's degree and they didn't have the money to hire somebody with a master's degree. Number two, I didn't have the connections that, of families that lived in Alaska. So, and I don't want to say that as an excuse, but I could not find a job as a teacher. So one thing led to another. September 11th happened, yada, yada. I'm over in the Sultanate of Oman. So was it difficult adapting to life in Oman? Well, Matt, if it was, I wouldn't have written a whole chapter in my book, My Year in Oman, and probably about every chapter in the 2 books that I wrote about living in Oman are talking about how it is difficult to adapt to a country in the Middle East. But I was pleasantly surprised. I had no trouble really adapting to it, but there were some things, as we talked about before, some issues of temperament, personality, that carried over with me from here that maybe, in retrospect, I probably should have left at home. Well, Oman certainly does sound interesting. Do you miss it? Do you miss the Middle East? I have to say that yes, I miss it terribly. I not only miss the Middle East, I miss the lifestyle that I used to have. If you've ever seen The Man Who Would Be King, it's like when you're here, when you're at home, you're like everybody else. But if you can go to a country like Oman and be a decent person, depending on your background and other things, you can have a very, very interesting time. And I sure did. So, yes, I missed it very much. I miss it very much, and I miss, most of all, I miss the fact that I can go to any student I ever had, any friend I ever made in Oman, and I can just sit down with them, and we can just sit and talk and be the best of friends. And so it's something that I never experienced in America and probably never will. I mean, I have lots of friends, but not people who were strangers all of my life and then one day just befriended me just because I was a teacher from America. And they were living in a village or something, and their father rode a donkey to get to the boat that he used to fish in. So it's very interesting things that you just couldn't even imagine. And that's why I wrote these books. What exactly is it that you miss about the Middle East? So you're really trying to pry here. Well, if you want to get right down to it, I don't miss a lot, although I would have had I not married my wife. because the one thing that I really loved about the Middle East was the different temperament in the women that you see there. Women in the Middle East or just outside of America in general are much more fun. They're not so easily offended. They don't, it's just a different story, and they have a sense of humor. And the people here, women here, I just don't see that as much, and so it's something that really I miss, is just being able to associate with women, and luckily I married my wife, and I was able to bring that back with me. My wife is from India, and there are so many wonderful cultures in the Middle East, and one of them happens to be the Indian culture and the Indian women. So I was very fortunate to be able to bring that aspect back with me, because if I hadn't done that, I would have been looking for it someplace else, and I'm sure I wouldn't have found it. So I was very lucky to have found a woman who would actually put up with me. Okay, Matthew, well then let's go back to your books. You went from 2 books about the Middle East, and then you switched gears and jumped into Deceptions of the Ages, Mormons, Freemasons, and Extraterrestrials. Now, this is a book about the connections between Mormons, Freemasons, and extraterrestrials. I have to ask you, is this the point at which you lost your mind? Ha 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 ha. Oh, that's very funny. Yeah, a lot of people, might think that, but the fact of the matter is, the one thing, if you look at history, world history, U.S. history, is that there are a lot of things that, well, I guess I'll call them the establishment, but there are a certain group of people who want certain knowledge to be kept to themselves and themselves alone. And so on that basis, most of what we have in the world today is based upon these people wanting to keep these secrets, and the world that has evolved out of that. And so I just felt that, based upon my upbringing, the things that I know to be true, I just wanted to share that knowledge that I was lucky enough to get with the rest of the world, and you don't have to get a PhD to have it. You just have to spend $20. But basically that was it. I just wanted to share this knowledge that I had because, again, of my unique experiences, and share it with the world so that the world could really understand what's going on. And what were the results of Deceptions of the Ages, Mormons, Freemasons, and Extraterrestrials, at least as far as commercially, and what were the reviews? And how was it accepted among the American mainstream? Well, as with all of my books, the results were not what I wanted. They were not what I expected, although I did sell more. I think I sold a few initially of my Uranomon, and that remained steady. That's remained steady over the years. But Deceptions of the Ages, when it first came out, because it says Deceptions of the Ages, Mormons, in quotation marks, so that would be a clue, I would hope. But people in the Latter-day Saint or Mormon community thought that it was an anti-Mormon book, and so they wouldn't read it. And so I got bad reviews from a guy in the place where I was actually born in Utah. So I set him straight, whatever, but it wasn't what I expected. And if you look on Amazon, I have great reviews for the book, and it really is an enlightening experience just to read it. And I like reading it just because there's so much in it that you can't possibly remember all these things. But it is, if I would say, that the work of my life that I will always be the most proud of, it's that one. So anyway, was it successful? Reasonably so. I wish it would have sold millions, and I'm not saying that it still might not, but I'm a little disappointed that this knowledge that I'm trying to share with people, they don't have it yet. So that's a little, whatever, discouraging. But I got great reviews, and when you have one good review and somebody says, "This is the best book I've ever read, this explains so much to me," then that's worth it. Just one review like that makes it worth it. Just like having a student who tells you you're the best teacher I've ever had. So that was the result so far of Deceptions of the Ages. All right, Matthew. So you wrote your, let's see, My Year in Oman. Then there was another Year in Oman, and then you wrote Deceptions of the Ages, and then you went back and wrote Killing Time in Saudi Arabia. After you wrote Killing Time in Saudi Arabia, you then switched gears again and you wrote your first fiction book called The Rainier Paradigm. Now, I call it fiction, but at this time, when the world is locked down because of this coronavirus and all of the implications that has, do you feel at all that you were just really lucky? Because most of the things that happen with the coronavirus have happened in the Rainier Paradigm. The only difference is there's no volcano. So how do you feel about the fact that you pretty much nailed the future right on the head? Do you feel like you're some kind of a prophet? No. What it is really, it's just common sense. I mean, we came back here from Saudi Arabia in 2013, and this place was just so overpopulated. And I don't want to go too far into it, but I grew up here, and this was just a beautiful place to live. And now there are so many people. The roads are jammed. There is trash everywhere. And all these people around here are just here to do what? Sell real estate, sell real estate, sell real estate. It's like tear it up, tear everything up, and sell real estate and bring in more people. So it's a no-brainer that eventually this place is going to become a environmental disaster. So if you just extrapolate a little bit that they have packed all these people in here, and there is a volcano. Actually, there's a volcano 50 miles north. There's a volcano about 30 miles south, and if you add those into a population of millions, and then you add into the fact that the only way out of here is by boat or by two highways, two major highways. The other highways in a volcano would be shut off immediately. And well, actually, all the highways during a volcano would be shut off. So these millions of people are stuck here with no way to escape. So if you add to that a government that is full of people who like to sell real estate, and they decide that they have a way to set off a volcano to sell more real estate, well, look around you right now. Look what's happening now. They'll do it. They'll do anything to make money. So yeah, I guess I got lucky, and I guess a lot of that stuff in it is true. And anyway, I guess you have to read the book to really see what's going on. But yeah, it's funny. All the elements are there. The computer people are there. The Chinese are there. The spies are there. The hackers are there. So it's got all the elements of life in the U.S. and definitely of life in Seattle and in Washington State. So yeah, I guess I just got lucky, and I just hope, like with Deceptions of the Ages, that more people will pick it up and enjoy it, because I think it's pretty fun. I mean, it's not a serious novel. It's funny, so but I guess it's not so funny now. So, has the Rainier paradigm become more popular since the coronavirus began? That's a funny question. I would have expected it too, but and not to be paranoid or anything, but I thought that this book would have just taken off. I mean, it's Seattle. It makes so much fun of Seattle, the people around Seattle. It makes fun of where I grew up. It makes fun of, computer companies and hackers. And I really thought it would have taken off. But it's like nobody even knows I wrote it. And then now that all this stuff is happening, if you had a paranoid mind, you'd go, did they try to like squelch this on purpose? Did they really did not want people to know what was going to happen in Seattle? So anyway, the only difference is, and I hope this never, well, I'm not going to even say it. So anyway, yeah, I thought it was going to be more popular than it is after the coronavirus. And also, I should also add that after the coronavirus, well, like you said, I started a company. I'm running for office in Washington State, so I really just haven't had the time to promote it. So maybe if I did promote it, people go, wait a minute, how did this guy know? So maybe we'll try that. Okay, Matthew, so last 3 years, let's talk about what you've been up to. You've started 3 companies, 2 podcasts, you've written 1 book. You've been very busy because most people would have been happy just to do those things. But in addition to that, you've run for the Senate, which you did in 2018, and you're presently in a campaign running for the governor of Washington State. So why do you feel motivated to do all of these things, especially all at the same time? I mean, right now, you're talking about running for governor of Washington State. You've just opened a business. You have a podcast. And who knows what else you've got going on. And so now I have to ask you, what keeps you going? What motivates you to do these things and to keep going? Well, I think more than anything, it is my desire to teach from the, how would you say, altruistic viewpoint. But from the realistic viewpoint, hey, I'm trying to make money. I'm trying to have a living. I'm trying to survive until Jesus calls me home. So it's really about economics, but it's also about the fact that I like to make people laugh. I like to entertain people, and I like to educate people. So this is, I guess, what I do because I enjoy doing it. If I enjoyed doing something else, then I would do that. But for right now, I guess I enjoy, well, as far as running for governor, I don't like running for governor at all. I don't like the fact that I even have to. I just don't trust anybody that is running for these offices. I don't trust anybody in these offices. And I know that everybody that's running for them just can't wait to get up there to start cutting deals. And it's just horrible. So I'm one of those people, who thinks that when I stand before my Creator, He's going to say, well, what did you do with your life? And there were a lot of bad things going on, and you didn't do anything about it. Well, I couldn't handle that. I have to be able to say, I tried, I did something. So, and then the other thing is about running for governor is that I really believe I'm the most qualified person. I mean, look at all the things that I've done. Read my books. I'm the most qualified person even to run the United States. I'm the most qualified person because of the experiences that I've had and the things that I know. So what motivates me to do it? Well, I guess that's it. I guess just a sense of I want to justify some part of this wonderful thing I've had the blessing of having called life. Okay, then. So let's talk about the podcasts. First of all, you started out with Books in Hindsight. and later that kind of morphed over into Encounters USA. Now, Books in Hindsight, you interviewed authors, and in Encounters USA, you switch gears and you interview people that have had contact with aliens, Dogman, Bigfoot. You interview researchers and you interview authors. So, what has been the result of switching from Books in Hindsight to Encounters USA? Was it worth it? Well, Matt, there you go again. You're putting that word worth on things, which just makes me want to attach a monetary value and make that the deciding factor on whether it was successful or not. Going back to Books in Hindsight, it was successful in the fact that I got to meet some wonderful, wonderful authors, and they taught me a lot. I got to interview Rick Lenz, who he worked with John Wayne, and I shouldn't say that. John Wayne worked with Rick Lenz, but he's a great actor, and I got to interview him for Books in Hindsight. So I've got to interview James Gilliland down at the East City Ranch for Books in Hindsight, and a couple of admirals, West Point graduates. It was really great stuff. And I met some great book publishers. So yeah, that was fantastic. Problem was that people are just not interested in books like they used to be. They're not interested so much in people talking about books unless those are the New York Times bestseller list authors. And of course, I'm never going to get them on my podcast. So it really turned out to be a lot of work. I mean, I would put the author's books on 2 different pages and links to Amazon and wherever their books were sold. So I would spend 10 hours just for a podcast. Maybe a little bit less, but that's probably about right. 10 hours for a podcast, and for what? And so I just started talking to my wife, and I've always been interested in the paranormal. So I asked my wife, or I told my wife, I said, you know what? If I'm going to work this hard, I want to work on something I'm interested in. I'm interested in aliens, Bigfoot, and Dogman. And so we made the switch to Encounters USA. And is it successful? I'm sorry. Is it worth it? Well, again, there's not the money there. My wife has gone through and put a lot of products and stuff that are really cool on my website, but I'm so wrapped up in just doing the podcast. It takes a lot of time, and for a long time I was doing 2 a week, and so with the editing and everything, that's 2 full days, and then you have to find guests, etc. So is it successful? I absolutely love it. I love Encounters USA. I've loved everybody I've interviewed on it, and so I love the UFO I team that I got to meet and work with, and I got to meet the people who saw Bigfoot the first time, and people who have seen Bigfoot. I've seen UFOs, so it's definitely been worth it. I can't say that enough. It's definitely been worth it. Okay, so a year later with Encounters USA, do you think that you're where you want to be, or is there something more that you'd like to get out of it? Well, that's a great question. Am I where I want to be with it? No, I'm not, because I really want to interview people in different fields like remote viewing. I want to interview people in the UFO field. But these people sell a lot of books, so they're much more in demand, and then they do these UFO, conferences, whatever. They're very hard to track down. So I'm a small fish in a pretty big pond. So am I where I want to be with it? No. And I want to be able to use that to make money. To make money in order to educate people and to go out and do expeditions. Like we're trying to get an expedition together this summer to look for aliens, Bigfoot, and Dogman. And so go out in the woods and look for monsters and aliens. I mean, what more could a person ask for? So, yeah, I love Encounters USA. I hope everybody does. A new book. Wow, so that will be number 8. Now, with all of your books, you started off with your My Year in Oman, that was a travelogue. The next one was kind of an ethereal, I don't know what another year in Oman was, a fantasy piece. Then you did a historical book, like a textbook almost, with Deceptions of the Ages. Then you went back to the travelogue. Then you did fiction. So what can we expect from this next book? Is it going to be a departure from the things you've done in the past? Well, Matt, you've made a very nice summary, except for I would just like to say that pretty much all of my books are a departure. A lot of people didn't understand Another Year in Oman, and you have to remember that based on the subject matter, it had to be written in a way that wouldn't get me killed. So it's written the way it is, and it's also written the way it is, as are all my books. They're all a departure from the book before. Most authors like to stick with a certain genre, and they're happy with that. But I like to experiment. I like to try new things. So this book is going to be actually science fiction. So it'll be my first attempt at writing science fiction. All right, now Matthew, you have got a company that you've just started, and it's kind of an interesting concept. You want to tell us a little bit about that? Well, I don't want to sound like a commercial, so I'm just going to say this. I think it's horrible how people are treated when they go to the store anymore. And I don't want to get into this coronavirus thing, but let's face it, it's a nightmare to go to the store. It's like being in Nazi Germany or something. And so to save people from that, I started a company called Store to You Express, where you just, use whatever store, grocery shopping service they have, and then we come and pick it up. About $25 for the service, and we'll go anywhere in my local area. And we're also planning to expand fairly soon. So yeah, but I think it's going to work. I think it's the right business model, and it keeps you from being limited to just like a Costco or Amazon Food or Prime Foods, whatever that is, Whole Foods, and or Fred Meyer, whatever. So you can get your groceries from any store and not be limited by like an Amazon Prime or Costco, whatever. So I think it's a great idea, and I've had a really lot of great feedback. So we've are almost into the business phase. We're making contact with apartments, and so we're waiting to hear back from different stores to see who wants to be a partner. So it's a great little idea, and hopefully it's going to pay off well, and it's going to be a great service for people who don't want to go to the store and get harassed just getting their groceries. All right, Matthew. Well, it's really been a wonderful interview. So to close up here, we started off talking about the concepts of fate and destiny. And you added that you thought that a person's will had something to do with it, a person's personality has something to do with it. We might even call it an Oedipus thing. But somehow the person we are, at least as far as you're concerned, does also affect us as far as our fate and what happens to us in our life. So with that in mind, would you like to tell us where fate, destiny, and your own will and your own personality are going to take you next? Are we going to continue with the governor campaign? Are we going to continue with the store to you express? Are we going to continue with Encounters USA? What can we expect in the future from Matthew Hines? Matt, I cannot thank you enough for asking that question. It's been a long, hard road. I have been doing Encounters USA I hit my year anniversary in the end of April. That was when I did my first few shows. I have been doing another podcast called Deceptions of the Ages. I also promote books. I do a lot of things, and as I said, I'm also starting a business and running for governor of Washington State. So with all that going on, my mind is like a whirlwind. And I'm just afraid that I need to just kind of step back from things for a little bit. And so at this point in time, as far as my governor campaign goes, I'm waiting for people to sign a petition so that I don't have to pay thousands of dollars to get on the ballot. And so I think I've got a week or so before the deadline. And if I don't have those signatures, I certainly am not going to waste a lot of money and time in a race that's probably very rigged. I mean, it was rigged when I ran for the Senate. 5 people that I ran with, Democrat and Republican, all contested the ballot count. So the only way I would want to be in the race is if I can be out there, and so that people know they can vote for me and that I'm a viable alternative. But with the way that they hide candidates, Google, Twitter, these TV stations in Seattle, they won't even give me the time of the day. So it's really something that at this point in time I can't afford to do, and it's a failing prospect. So we'll see what happens. If I have enough people supporting me, just a few thousand, I got like 6,000 or 7,000 votes in the last election. If I could get that many signatures on the ballot or on my petition and get on the ballot, then I would be happy about running, and I'd go 100%. But unfortunately, I'm not sure that's going to happen. As far as my business goes, Store to You Express, I'm working on getting my clients and customers, so that's going to take a little bit of time. And so to answer your question right now, since we've been talking about books so much, I'm taking about a month, and I've got a book I'm going to write, and I'm just going to basically shut things down, including probably Encounters USA. We'll see how it goes. I might do 1 or 2 interviews, but during this coronavirus, it's been difficult to even concentrate on aliens, Bigfoot, or Dogman when all this horrible stuff is happening to us by our leaders. So with all that going on, I think that for my own health, my own mental well-being, I'm going to take some time off, and I'm going to write this book. And when you see this book, I think you're going to enjoy it. I think you're going to understand why it was important for me to take some time off and write it to get it to you. So I guess that's the answer. That's what destiny and fate and my own temperament have in store for me. All right, Matthew. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I cannot wait to check out this latest book that you've got coming out, and I want to wish you the best of luck with Store to You Express, with Encounters USA, and with your Heinz for Gov or Heinz for Governor campaign. Well, thank you, Matt, and I also want to reciprocate and say good luck with your show as well. All right, so before you go, I just want to tell everybody Matthew's books are available at hindsight.com. You can also get them at amazon.com and Barnes & Noble and Walmart, any of the other places you like to shop, either in-store or online. And also let me remind you that Matthew has 2 books we haven't talked about, Hindsights and another funny book. I'm not going to mention the name because I would get censored on Google, on YouTube and Google. So please check out hindsight.com, check out Matt's books. And until the next show, we'll see you next time.